Welcome to Season 3 of the Soundstage Audiophile Podcast. Last year, host Jorden Guth got a crash course in the fundamentals of hi-fi from enthusiasts, journalists, manufacturers, and music industry professionals alike. And those lessons will continue, but this year, Jorden will also get a history lesson from the legends who were there from the giddy up and who made hi-fi what it is today. So with that out of the way, here's Jorden and this week's guest.
Hello and welcome to the Soundstage Audiophile Podcast. Today, we are joined by Marcela Rada. Marcela is not only an established recording engineer, she has an extensive academic accolades, currently pursuing a PhD related to immersive music production. And on top of that, she also shares a lot of her knowledge in the classroom as a professor of music production. Welcome, Marcela.
Hello, thank you for having me.
So to get in, I was doing a bunch of different research before we chatted, and it's very apparent that you have a deep love and appreciation for pretty much everything audio.
Yes, it is my life. I can't. There's every time someone asks me, like, okay, but what are your hobbies? Like, they always expect, like, audio. Okay, but what else? You know, like, what else about you? And like, I feel like weird because everything that I do is related to audio. Like, even the things that I consider to be fun is like, yeah, it's still related to somewhat work, you know, which I think is great because I love everything that I do.
Oh, that's amazing. Was there do you have this first memory or like an instant in your life where you kind of discovered audio or music or something that kind of sparked the journey that you are now on?
Yes, 100%. I've told this story before because a lot of people ask me that. And I think it's because I am so obsessed that they're like, okay, how did this start?
Yeah.
And I was about 6 years old and I started playing with a field recorder that my mom had lying around. And it was a cassette field recorder.
Okay.
And I discovered that I could record and hear myself. And then that was the beginning of everything. You know, I would just use it. That was my toy, you know, I would go around recording sounds and record myself singing. And it was this thing that I just absolutely loved. It was so interesting. And from there, I kind of started playing with other audio equipment, even just learning to record the radio at the time. You know, a lot of us did that.
Yeah.
I figured it out on my own as a kid. And it was just a very independent process because, you know, a lot of people have their parents or somebody to influence them in that way. But this was something that I just kind of did on my own. And yeah, it started when I was a kid.
And this I know that you ended up going to school for this, quite a bit of school, but did you start playing instruments along the way? What kind of instruments? I see guitars in the background here.
Oh, I love how you said a bit of school. Yeah, I've actually never left school. I started with piano.
Okay.
And then electric guitar. And I had this rock band phase, in high school, you know, I wanted to be a rock star. But I quickly realized that wasn't my call. I didn't want to perform in front of people. And I was more interested in the technical side of things. So then when I discovered that I could do just audio.
Yeah.
I kind of left the instruments. So yeah, I know you see guitars, but I don't really play much.
And when you started going to school, what was fascinating for me, and when I read this, I had to double check that there wasn't two Algonquins in the world. You went to Algonquin. I live in Ottawa. Doug lives in Ottawa. Soundstage is based in Ottawa.
Yeah, that's right.
You're not originally from Ottawa, I'm assuming, but how did you come to Ottawa? How did that become a thing?
Well, I am.
Oh, you
I was
are
raised
Ottawa.
in Canada. I was raised in Canada. Yeah. I'm Canadian. I'm Colombian Canadian.
But you live in Europe.
But I've lived in many places. But yes,
okay.
So now I live in London.
Amazing.
But yes, I was raised in Canada. So as soon as I was most of my teenage years, I was living in Niagara Falls.
Awesome.
And as soon as I was done high school, I went to Algonquin College, which was a very new program at the time. Like it had only been running for a couple of years. But yeah, that's kind of where I started my formal education.
And that was in music production.
Yes. So the program is called Music Industry Arts, which I ended up teaching a few years later. Yeah, it had combined a lot of aspects of the music industry. And so they do have a recording studio, and I got pretty much like the foundation of recording and mixing in a professional recording studio. But it also touched on the business side of things, and that reassured me that I wanted to do engineering.
Yeah. And when you got out of Algonquin, did you immediately start going towards the other kind of academic avenues, or did you start actually being a sound engineer for bands or kind of local productions, or kind of what was that like right out of school for you?
I took a year to figure things out. You know, every time you like, I don't know, this happens to a lot of people. It happened to me. Every time I'm done like some kind of degree or something, you're like, okay, now what? And I took a year to do some freelance work and figure out the next steps. And I decided to go back to school this time to do, because that first program that I did at Algonquin was a 1-year program. It's kind of a diploma. And I am very academic. I always thought I'll go to university anyway and get a bachelor degree. And so I took that year to prepare for that. And then I enrolled at the University of Lethbridge, and I did a Bachelor of Music with a major in digital audio arts. So that was like my, I guess, a proper undergrad program, a 4-year program, which I actually did in 3 years.
Oh, that's awesome. And I guess one of the other things, there's the academic side of things. And when I think about an audio engineer or sound engineer, there's both the kind of technical elements, which I'm sure the school side of things really helps you with. But then there's also like the artistic side of things. In order to have people want to work with you, sure, they need to know that you can do the technical stuff. That's kind of like a given. But then there's the kind of what else do you bring to it? What's the artistic side of things? So were you developing that artistic side, or were you thinking about that as you went through school? Or is that kind of as you're practicing, like, or do you even think about the artistic side, or do you just have kind of a natural inclination to that?
Well, yeah, definitely that program prepared me for that side of things, because it was a Bachelor of Music. So I learned to read music, compose music, and learn the musicianship skills. So like training your ear and all of that. So yeah, it was definitely a combination of both. And I think it's not only that musicianship skills and the technical skills, but also the social skills in a way, because you do need to learn to collaborate with people and have clients that work for people. And it is a creative environment where perhaps it is your responsibility to make sure that everybody feels good in the space. So that is also another aspect that perhaps they don't teach at school, but that you need to work towards, developing those skills. Thankfully, I am naturally an outgoing person, and I like being around people and being, social. So that helps.
So whereabouts along the line here did you start kind of exploring more into the immersive audio space? The kind of 360, the kind of more cutting edge, I would say.
Yeah, very early on during my undergrad, actually. So during my undergrad, I started experimenting with recording with a binaural microphone, or like a binaural head. And then we mixed in surround as well, 5.1, but that's not really immersive. So that was like the first time that I produced something in a binaural format. And I loved it. It was like a radio play, and with sound effects and everything. And I think, that was the beginning of my love for immersive audio specifically.
And you kind of mentioned something there, and it's interesting. There is quite a bit of a difference between immersive audio and surround sound. Do you want to kind of take a stab at what that difference is, just to kind of set the stage of like why immersive is different, or maybe not better, but different than surround sound?
Well, yeah, basically one main difference, there are quite a few, but I would just say one main difference is that with immersive technology, for example, like ambisonics and any other, immersive technology or spatial audio technology, we add the height to that equation. And so now we got you not only have the sides all around you, that horizontal plane, but now you get the vertical plane and you get the height. So like sounds above and below, and there's more depth. So now you have kind of like a 360-degree sphere around your head, which can only be created by adding that to the equation.
And I guess if you're setting up to do kind of a spatial or immersive audio recording, is the actual recording quite a bit different? Is the equipment different? Or is this something that you could potentially not retrofit, but is this something you could potentially do to existing audio to add that level of immersion?
Well, yeah, that kind of goes, that relates to the workflow, right? And that's literally what my PhD is about.
Tell us the workflow.
No, I don't have one for you. And I just started, so. But basically, spatial audio is not new. It is perhaps people are talking about it more lately, like in the past couple of years, since like around 2020, because Dolby Atmos came into the picture with Dolby Atmos for music. And now we got streaming platforms also allowing us to listen to music in a spatial audio format. So, but it has been around for decades. And the research has been done when it comes to recording techniques. And there are many recording techniques that you can use with regular microphones or your regular like hardware microphones, microphone arrays that, allow you to capture the room and directionality. There are ambisonic microphones that record in 360, and that also, depending on the order of the ambisonic microphone, you get a lot more detail when it comes to the position of the sound sources. So we got, in terms of hardware, you can use your regular microphones. You can use different perhaps stereo miking techniques combined, and you can use ambisonic microphones. So when it comes to recording, the hardware is there and you can experiment or read about it and get recording in that way. You can get very creative as well. And I think, if you have the opportunity to go into a recording studio that, has the microphones and the possibility to experiment, then, it's great. But if you do not have that, the idea is perhaps to make sure that you record sounds that can be isolated, so then you can position them in a 360 sound field without having information from another source. Does that make sense? So, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you don't want to muddy up the signal. You want it to be clearly distinct from one.
Exactly. So then if you position it somewhere, then it's not coming from a different, direction, because then that would be weird, because now it's not just in the place where you want it, but it's somewhere else. If it's leaking or bleeding into another microphone, let's say, or source. And then when it comes to, okay, let's say that you didn't worry about it during the recording process. Well, now we got lots of platforms that allow us to spatialize sound. Of course, like Dolby Atmos is the most prominent one at the moment, or let's say music industry standard. And we are spatializing songs that perhaps have not been recorded for immersive, but that can still be done. And for my research specifically, what I'm looking into is workflows that include the creative process, not just the technical process. So not just, using these microphones or using this platform, or but the creative process of working with the artists. What do artists need to think about when it comes to their composition or arrangement or their, choice of instruments? And I think thinking about immersive, can inspire people and can give you even more ideas. And I think there's got to be a conversation between the artists and the engineers, because at the moment, a lot of that creative responsibility, let's say, it's falling on the mixing engineer. I think, this mixes could really shine if everybody involved in the production process was thinking in spatial. So I want to focus on that creative workflow, let's say, that does include the technology. Of course, you can't. You need to have both.
Yeah.
But I want to, leave the music industry with at least recommendations that people will take into account when they think, okay, my song is going to be mixed in Dolby Atmos. Like as an artist, for example, like I'm going to think about how I want my sound sources to be spatialized. And I think that can inspire people. So in that sense, that is kind of the workflow that I want to focus on, also because we need to make sure that whatever we're doing now is future-proof. The technology changes so fast and so often. And so having a workflow right now and investing on a workflow, a lot of people are investing a lot of money on this technology. And I think, making sure, thinking about all of this being future-proof is important. So if there is a new render or multiple renders that we need to mix for that, our workflow would just make it easy to simply get the mix through different renders and still work. So yeah, I mean, a lot to discuss if you want to get more into it. But.
Well, and I'm kind of curious, like I think about it a little bit more from a higher up level, where like I'm thinking about the difference between, like, let's say recording stereo or recording mono and then recording some of these immersive sounds. Like when it comes to the mixing and mastering process, let's say the recording itself is roughly similar. You have more microphones and you're capturing more of the stuff or the different audio paths or positions. But when it comes to the mixing and the mastering, are there major differences between that process from stereo to immersive? Or is it just longer? Does it need to be longer? Is it more expensive, or is there other considerations there that that somebody would need to kind of think about to kind of do that?
It is quite different in that you need to learn more things technically. Like you need to prepare yourself, educate yourself. If you've been mixing stereo for many years now, going into an immersive environment for the first time is quite the process. And so I have been researching it for a while. It was also, a focus in my master's thesis. And so I think about it in perhaps a scientific way, because I understand the psychoacoustics of it. For somebody that has never been around it or read about it or, even listened to it, it is a process and an adjustment as well. And just like you train your ear to hear certain frequencies for mixing, you have to train your ear to hear problems or masking or all of that. Like that is a process that takes years technically to become really good at it. Now you're spatializing sound and frequencies are going to play differently, and you're going to have other problems, perhaps like time delay and depending on like calibration, for example. Now you got to think about where those speakers are positioned and what they're positioning or how is it affecting the way that you listen in your space. So there's just more things to learn. But for somebody that understands audio, it's not completely
drastic. It's not completely
foreign. A whole new degree or anything. I mean, you could go back to school if you wanted to, but that's not necessary. I think it's just a matter of finding the right sources. And this is why I want to write an educational tool. So basically, my thesis is an educational tool and will hopefully become a textbook or at least guidelines where people can just get the information they need to get started and be aware of the things that they need to consider that perhaps they're not finding everywhere. It's very easy to find, for example, how to use Dolby Atmos within your DAW.
Sure.
That's like super easy to find. Go on YouTube, go on the Dolby Atmos website. It is harder to find, for example, mixing techniques and that, that creative process. Where should you position things? There are no rules, right?
Yeah.
And so you gotta learn to listen critically and train your ear to listen in that immersive environment. So that would be new to people that only have mixed in stereo.
And with that, we're going to take a quick break. And after the break, we'll jump more into that and how it relates to maybe hi-fi. Welcome back. We are here with Marcela Rada. Just before the break, we were talking a little bit about the differences and similarities in recording, mixing, and mastering between immersive audio and stereo audio, let's say. One question that I didn't ask that I kind of just thought about was, when I think of immersive audio, there's an element that there's kind of a speaker setup that you can have. But then immersive audio does have quite a lot of headphone users, people experiencing immersive audio via headphones. Is there a difference in mastering immersive audio for headphones versus speakers, or are those the exact same, or kind of what happens when you're kind of optimizing for both those platforms?
Well, basically, when we mix for an immersive production, our goal is to make sure that the mix translates well through all devices. So we prepare for headphones, we prepare for your MacBook speakers, we prepare for your car, if your car, of course, has the audio system, which many do now, new cars anyway. We also prepare for your regular stereo and for mono. So the mix needs to translate well through all devices. So you don't mix for headphones specifically and then for speakers specifically. The one mix needs to translate well. That means that when we're mixing, a lot of people, rely mainly on speakers. So if they have a 7.1.4 setup, that's what they'll use to mix the entire project. And they'll check on headphones and other devices all throughout. And so you're basically like, with stereo, normally we'll check stereo, mono, and then maybe you'll bring it to your car or whatever. With immersive audio, we're constantly checking through devices, and you'll see studios that will have like a set of headphones that they rely on. Obviously, the speaker setup. They'll have a sound bar, which also have now the new sound bars will output immersive audio. So we check through different devices to make sure that the mix translates well. Now, the decision to perhaps just rely on speakers or on headphones or on both is a personal preference. And right now is kind of like what's working for individuals. This is what I'm finding out through my research. A lot of people know what their speakers sound like. They're very familiar with if they do something through just relying on their speakers, they'll know what it's going to sound on headphones, while other people will do 50% on speakers, 50% on headphones, and other people will start then and do the majority of the mix on headphones, and then they'll rent a studio with a 7.1.4 and check there on the last day,
Interesting.
So there's kind of like at that, just by saying that there's 3 different workflows when it comes to monitoring specifically. But at the end, the idea, however you do it and however it works for you, is to make sure that the mix is going to translate well through different devices.
So throughout your research, do you find that like certain demographic of people kind of are more accepting of this technology than others? Like a lot of the people that visit Soundstage and kind of go to our content are very much hi-fi enthusiasts. So they have the range of different music that they listen to. A lot of it's stereo. Some of it is via headphones. For immersive audio, do you find that there is like hi-fi enthusiasts that are kind of after that sound, or is this more the home theater crowd, or is this a mix? Is this like VR gaming, or like is there an identifiable demographic here?
That's hard to answer because I like to give answers that I can back up with data, and I don't have the data to back it up. So I wouldn't be able to tell you. What I would say, though, is that a lot of people are listening to it without even knowing that it is a Dolby Atmos mix, for example. Like if you're listening through Apple Music, you perhaps might already be listening in the Dolby Atmos mixes without even knowing that it is different from the stereo. And I'm talking about, your regular listener that perhaps has no clue.
Yeah.
Now there is people that do believe in, higher that immersive mixes are higher quality, and that, if it's done well, you'll hear a lot more detail. And you got this, in stereo, what we're trying to do is make sure that our mix is wide most of the time, and that we, and now we got this whole space, and is being mixed with, well, depending on how, but let's pretend that everybody has a speaker setup. Is now being mixed in recording studios with proper setups, with like proper calibration, etc. So if the whole process is done this way, it is higher quality, and so now a lot of people will tell you that the mixes that they've heard suck and that they're not better than the stereo version. If you're used to listening to an old song in stereo and you know exactly how it sounds, now hearing like a different version that perhaps it's very different from the stereo mixes can be weird. Also, It might not be done well because of many reasons, because the engineer perhaps didn't have the multi-track. They had to work with stems that had a lot of information in just one stem. Like if you couldn't separate the drums and you got just a stereo drum stem, like it's very hard to spatialize. That's what I was saying, that you need individual sources that could be spatialized individually. And so when you work with older music, like this is what's happening. I think taking older songs and starting to mix them in immersive environments, maybe some of that wasn't done super well. And so a lot of people that heard it were like, well, this is pointless. Why are we doing this? It doesn't sound any better than the stereo version. And, I did that and I thought about that too. I think, if it can't be done well, why do it at all? And I think about that now, like with even new music, like if it's not going to be done well, or if it's not going to be enhanced by mixing it in an immersive environment, why do it at all?
If it's not adding value, why put extra effort into it? Exactly.
But at the same time, there's a huge push by record labels and streaming platforms. I do believe that the immersive format is here to stay. Apple Music is backing it up, Google, Samsung, all the big tech companies. Just by Apple embracing, the technology, that means is here to stay, and they are developing the visual content, or, the devices that would allow us to, I guess, immerse visually. Those are going to need immersive audio to be completely immersive. You can't, a visual experience that doesn't have the auditory aspect is not completely immersive technically, and so you're going to need the audio aspect as well. So I think it's here to stay, and we need to embrace it. We need to learn how to work with it, and people need to be a lot more informed as to how to listen to it. If you need to change a setting on your phone to be able to listen to it properly, you need to know that you have to do that.
Yeah.
And if you don't know that, of course, it's not going to sound well because you're not listening to it properly.
The way that it was intended to sound.
Exactly. And just starting from that alone, just like a setting that you got to change. If you don't know, that is already a problem. I think it's just, the information needs to be out there. People need to know about it and listen to it properly, create for an immersive environment, mix properly. Everything needs to be done well, and it's a learning process. So by the time we get there, it's going to be a couple years for sure, a few years, just like when we went from mono to stereo. There was a lot of hesitation. You'll hear a lot of mixes that were whack.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like history is repeating itself in a way.
Yeah, similar going from fully analog to digital, right?
Exactly.
People have the same reservations there.
Exactly. Like, why use Pro Tools? Like, it's not gonna, and at the beginning, of course, it's not gonna be perfect because the technology needs to develop. And in order to develop, we gotta start using it and get feedback, and then we gotta mess it up. And that's just the process. That's the process. It's a learning process. So, expecting a new format to sound perfect from the beginning is unrealistic. And closing your mind to it is also not beneficial for anybody. So if perhaps, because I've heard a lot of this comments by people that perhaps are audiophiles, but also are hesitant to even embrace immersive audio. What I would say is it's a process. We're going to learn about it. We're going to mess up. We're going to make it better. And it's here to stay. So why even, bother?
So, you were kind of mentioning a couple times, and we spoke with a recording artist, Montreal local, Dominique Filzami, and she recorded everything in Dolby Atmos, and it's absolutely beautiful. And she was talking about, as an artist, that was one of her decisions. Like, she said she wanted to do that. And part of the reason why was because she wanted everyone to feel as if they were being hugged by the music all the way around, which I thought was absolutely incredible. And she's on Apple Music and all this other stuff. When you were kind of talking about that, the I guess the platforms that support it, there's Apple that supports Dolby Atmos. What other platforms are out there?
Amazon Music and Tidal.
And Tidal. Okay.
And I feel like I'm missing something, but yeah, those are the big ones.
And is there other standards out there that aren't Dolby Atmos? Like, maybe what's the difference between ambisonic and Dolby Atmos? Are there differences between
yes,
ambisonic audio?
There are differences. Yes. The thing is, ambisonics has been around for many decades.
Okay.
It's been around for many, many years, and the technology that allows us to record with an ambisonic microphone, for example, that has been around for a long time. The encoding and decoding process has been also around for a long time. Ambisonics allows us to spatialize sound in a way that it will adapt to the output. And it is kind of like an older way of doing it, let's say.
Okay.
Put it in simple terms. Dolby Atmos, their goal is to make sure that you can spatialize sound and you have enough depth, and it comes with, the binaural ways to ensure that perhaps you want close, mid, or far. There's a lot more control in that sense as well. But there are a lot of ambisonic platforms out there that will come with, everything that you need to spatialize something. And a lot of people use them for example, installations. and things like that, where you got a whole speaker setup and you could have many, many speakers, and then you kind of use these platforms within Reaper or even Ableton Live. And a lot of people I know use Ableton Live with Max for live and specialized sound within Ableton, because you can't use Dolby Atmos yet with Ableton. So that's a way to do it. There's the Sparta plugin suite. There's the IAM plugin suite. And they all allow you, they're ambisonic plugins or ambisonic technology that allow you to visualize sound. You can import your ambisonic recording and decode it within these platforms and listen to it in binaural. So all of these are great, actually, and that's how I started. And I would still teach my students how to use these before even getting into Dolby Atmos, because the technology, has been there and is very useful. And I also don't believe that only one platform should be the one. I do think that people should be able to choose. And depending on many things, depending on budget, depending on their goals, depending on how they want to get creative. A lot of these plugin suites allow you to get creative in different ways compared to Dolby Atmos. And so, technically, I guess one main difference is that the encoding and decoding process of audio, whether it is, decoding for binaural or decoding your ambisonic recording, that would be a main difference between what ambisonic plugins do and what Dolby Atmos does.
Got it. Dolby Atmos is kind of like one standard of many that take advantage of ambisonic sound.
I wouldn't call Dolby Atmos ambisonic.
Okay.
But the chord of what we know about ambisonics is definitely used in Dolby Atmos technology, but they, let's say, don't identify as ambisonics.
Okay. And you kind of touched on this, and it's an interesting idea, right? When you think about who has the ability to record in this, is it only the kind of the high-end musicians or the Beatles, the Pink Floyds, let's say, of our day, if there are any? I don't know if there are. Probably not. Is this like really expensive studio time only, or could ambisonic Dolby Atmos, this kind of immersive sound, be recorded in like a home studio or by yourself, by like the Billie Eilishes of today, for instance? What is expensive about it is the speaker setup, technically. Okay. So because of course having access to a studio that has a speaker setup is already expensive, and bringing the setup to your home studio is also very expensive. So I think that would be the only thing that I would say is, it's hard to access. When it comes to the technology itself, it's very, very easy. So those plugin suites that I just mentioned, the ambisonic plugin suites, are free. And Dolby Atmos is not free, but also not impossible to get, I would say. I shouldn't say that. It might be impossible for some people. So I guess in terms of accessibility, it sits with other plugins. So if you are doing this professionally, I guess is something that you could invest on. But for people that are not doing it professionally and they want to mess around with, then there are other plugins that are free. And for example, and also the Dolby Atmos is already integrated into Logic. So if you have Logic, the latest version of Logic, you have Dolby Atmos. If you have the latest version of Pro Tools, perhaps Pro Tools Ultimate, you have Dolby Atmos as well, because it's already integrated into Pro Tools. So
it's there to mess around with. The educational tools are on the internet. So as long as you have internet, you can access those and start learning. So no, I think it's extremely accessible. If you want to learn about it, you just need a pair of headphones, because if you listen in binaural, you would already hear. And at the end of the day, most people will listen on headphones. So we are mixing on speakers to ensure that the mix translates well, as I mentioned before. That doesn't mean that everybody's going to listen to it on a speaker setup. That is also unrealistic. So no, a lot of people have that as, I guess, an argument. They would say that, why mix in a 7.1.4 if nobody has that?
Yeah. Or not very many people have it. Yeah,
exactly.
Absolutely.
Like you don't have that at home. Yeah, totally. We're not mixing for it so you listen to it in that environment. We're mixing with speakers to make sure that the mix translates well in different environments.
Yeah, you're going to the highest that they could possibly have, and then everything else kind of flows from that.
Exactly. So that's, I think, one thing that some people don't understand. And so, but I look forward to the day when we don't need very expensive speakers and the whole 7.1.4 setup. Perhaps one day we're only mixing for glasses, that will have
Apple Vision Pros.
Exactly, like Apple Vision Pro, but now they're just gonna, and with time, they'll just become glasses that we just wear daily. And in that way, we're listening literally through the speakers that are integrated in the glasses, for example. And so then we're gonna mix for that. And perhaps then the technology will change. Like perhaps we're not listening through a very expensive 7.1.4 to mix, but there'll be a different way of mixing to adapt to that. I don't know. Either way, right now, the access or accessibility to the speaker setup is the most complex and more expensive. But if you have a pair of headphones, a DAW that has Dolby Atmos, or a DAW that works with any other, VST, you can get started by yourself at home.
Well, so there's a high chance that the individuals, the musicians that are actually making their music today, it's not unfathomable to think that they could actually record and kind of take advantage of some of this technology.
Perhaps recording might be difficult if you're not in the right recording space, because the sources, like I said, need to be pretty isolated. Perhaps you got to really take care of noise and any kind of bleeding. So if you're only dealing with electronic elements, for example, great. All you have to do is specialize them in Dolby Atmos. If you're using Logic, pretty easy. I think that's like the fastest way to do it. If you're using Logic, so easy to just get the Dolby Atmos render on the master fader and start using the Dolby Atmos panner is super easy. That's like I said, using the tools is not hard. Now, learning the mixing techniques and training your ear, that takes time. Yeah. But if you're an artist, you're not doing that. That's for the mixing engineer. So I'm speaking to the artists out there that are listening to this. If you don't need to train your ear to mix for this environment, but simply you want to use it to get creative and just start moving sources and specialize them, that is super easy.
And so you spoke to the artist. For the listeners, for people that are enjoying the music, what would be the pitch for somebody, let's say, that is a diehard audiophile that's used to either mono or stereo? What would be your pitch to get them to try out immersive audio, be it Dolby Atmos or Ambisonic, whatever it may be?
I think listening to new music, and because, like I said, like some of like older songs that we know well and have been adapted to Dolby Atmos, some sound amazing, by the way. And you're like, wow, I never heard this synthesizer in this song before. I never heard those vocals before, like back backup vocals that now are like super clear, and you're like, oh, or like now you're like understanding the lyrics because it's a lot more clear. Like there's some great examples. Okay. Well, like, there are some that are not so great. So I think it's a matter of like listening a lot and like, because you're not going to find what you like unless you listen and explore. You got to take the time to listen. And I would listen to also like new music, new things that are going out there. For example, Snarky Puppy's, I think, latest album in Dolby Atmos is sounding amazing. That's one that I would recommend. Also, the kind of music that has organic sources, I mean, I love like, listening to like real instruments that were recorded really well and that now have been specialized, and you hear all that detail. So yeah, Snarky Puppy's Empire Central, one of my favorites right now. And I don't know, yeah, just like if that's not the kind of music that you listen to, find the genre and then just listen and see. And there's some really great mixes out there. We're getting so much better at it.
In that it segues perfectly. One of the questions that we ask everyone that comes on the show is towards the end is, what is the soundtrack to your life? What is the music that you like to listen to on the day-to-day? Or if me and you were to jump in a car and do a long road trip, what would you put on for us to listen to?
It's really hard because it depends on my mood really, or the day, or the person that I'm with. It just really depends a lot. I listen to a lot of music and very different. So that would be really hard to answer. But I guess one genre that is like my go-to would be R&B. I'm a huge R&B fan, I guess. So I would say I listen to a lot of R&B, but I've had phases in my life as well. I had a heavy metal phase. I had, like an electronic phase, like those days in Ibiza I had. So like I've had all of those. And I love that because I connect with all kinds of people. And based on, like if I get in the car with you and you tell me what you like, I will jam to it. I'll know the lyrics because I listen to everything. So I don't know. But yeah, I guess I listen to a lot of R&B.
So I'll tweak it just for you specifically, which is, can you tell me a mix? Let's say I've never listened to Dolby Atmos or immersive audio. What is one that you would say is done really well that you'd be like, this is one that you should listen to? Irregardless of genre or anything else that you can say, yeah, this will give you a good representation of what Dolby Atmos is all about, or immersive audio.
I mean, one that a lot of people know and we all kind of agree that is great is Rocket Man.
Get some Elton John in there.
Yeah, everybody that I've talked to agrees that it's a great Dolby Atmos mix.
And to finish things up, if people want to learn more about what you're up to, how your PhD is going, what kind of academic stuff you're going to do next, and recording in general, where can they find you? Where can they learn more about you?
Yeah, I'm very active on social media, and I try to keep people updated on the things that I'm doing for my research. Also because I need participants and I need to involve all kinds of people. So I'm very active on social media, and I am sharing a lot of what I'm doing on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. So I am the Marcela Rada on all social media platforms. And yeah, on Instagram, I like to share a lot of more like fun things that I do. But if you just want to know about my research, then definitely LinkedIn.
Thank you so much for joining us, Marcela. I really appreciate it.
Okay, well, thank you.